He was the man America trusted with its deepest stories, the face of integrity, the voice of quiet power, the actor who turned every moment of silence into truth. Denzel Washington built an empire not made of marble and gold, but of discipline, endurance, and a legacy that reshaped Hollywood's moral compass. With an estimated fortune exceeding $280 million, homes overlooking the California coastline, and a collection of awards that could fill a museum, he stood as one of the last guardians of classic American greatness. Yet the weight of that legacy, the consistency he demanded of himself, and the sacrifices he carried in silence created a shadow only those closest to him ever truly saw. His triumphs illuminated the world, but the cost of holding himself to a higher standard than anyone else would become the burden he could never entirely put down. And so America bowed, not to the wealth, not to the trophies, but to the man who dared to walk through fame without losing the gravity of who he was. Behind the sheen of success lay a story forged in hunger, loss, and an unbroken promise made in the quiet corners of his childhood. In that stillness, the real Denzel began to take shape, waiting for the world to finally understand the price he paid to become its symbol of unwavering strength. He was born in 1954, not into privilege, but into a world shaped by discipline, faith, and the quiet ache of limitation. Mount Vernon was not the city of bright dreams. It was a place of cracked sidewalks, cold winters, and small apartments where hope had to be earned, not wished for. His mother worked long hours in a beauty salon, shaping confidence for others while hiding her own exhaustion. His father, a stern minister, believed silence was a form of strength, a belief that would become the backbone of Denzel's life. Between them, the house carried two sounds, the hum of survival and the echo of prayer. As a boy, he felt the weight of expectation, without anyone ever saying a word. He watched friends drift into danger, watched doors close on boys who looked just like him, watched the distance between who he was and who he wanted to become stretch like an unforgiving road. And then came the moment that altered everything. Being sent away to a boarding school after falling in with the wrong crowd. What others saw as punishment, he saw as a second chance. In the quiet of that new environment, away from the noise of his old life, he felt something ignite, a desire to rise, to build, to never again let circumstance define him. He made himself a promise in that solitude, a promise sharp enough to cut through every fear he carried. He would not remain powerless. That vow became the soft drum beneath every step of his future, guiding him toward a destiny even he could not yet imagine. His rise did not begin with applause. It began with small stages, worn-out scripts, and the quiet persistence of a young man who studied human behavior the way others study survival. At Fordham University, he found acting not by destiny, but by accident, a suggestion from a professor, a hesitant audition, and then a spark he could no longer ignore. That spark carried him to the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, where he learned to sharpen every breath, every gesture, every pause into something deliberate. His presence grew not from volume, but from control, and soon Hollywood noticed the man whose silence carried more power than another actor's monologue. The turning point came with Saint Elsewhere, the series that placed him in America's living rooms and revealed a talent impossible to overlook. From there, he moved like a force in motion. Glory, Malcolm X, Training Day, each performance a declaration that he wasn't just acting, he was sculpting truth. Awards followed him like a shadow. Oscars, Golden Globes, lifetime honors from institutions that rarely agreed on anything. His net worth climbed as steadily as his reputation, crossing more than $280 million through decades of relentless discipline. With that fortune, he built a quiet empire, a gated home in Los Angeles, a ranch where he escaped the world's noise, investments that reflected his preference for stability over extravagance. But his greatest luxury was solitude, the one place where he could think, rehearse, rebuild. And yet, as the spotlights grew brighter and the roles became heavier, a different kind of silence followed him. The kind that settles in the spaces between victories. The kind that asks a man whether success has taken more than it gave. In that deepening stillness, The next chapter of his journey began to take its shape, slower, darker, more fragile than the world ever imagined. He had everything, yet lost what mattered most. The further he climbed, the more he felt the weight of the world he carried on his shoulders. The need to be perfect, the pressure to represent, the silent expectation that a black man in Hollywood must never stumble. That burden hardened him in ways fame could not soften. His marriage endured storms that the public never saw, battles fought behind closed doors where pride and exhaustion collided. The roles that made him an icon also took pieces of him, each character leaving behind a residue of sorrow, rage, or loneliness that he could never fully wash away. Nights grew quieter, darker, longer. The man who gave strength to millions often returned home drained, his voice low, his spirit pulled thin. There were moments when he questioned whether greatness had taken too much. The time spent away from his children while shaping American cinema, the emotional bruises from carrying stories heavier than most men could bear, the ache of realizing that discipline, his lifelong armor, had also become a prison. Friends spoke of how intensely he worked, how he shouldered pain without complaint, how he held himself to standards no one else would dare to impose. And in those rare hours of solitude, he confronted the truth that even the mightiest legacy casts a long shadow. All the homes he built, all the wealth he earned, all the accolades engraved with his name could not shelter him from the storms within. And so, in the dim light of those difficult years, he learned what fame could never teach, that a man's true worth is revealed not in the applause, but in the quiet moments when he faces himself. Unguarded, uncertain, and undeniably human, what he left behind was more than a fortune. Yes, the material legacy is undeniable, a net worth surpassing $280 million, foundations he quietly supported, scholarships he funded without chasing publicity, opportunities he created for young black actors who only needed one open door to change the course of their lives. But the deeper legacy, the one America bows to, lives in the discipline he embodied, the moral clarity he carried into every room, the standard he set for an industry that often forgets its conscience. His performances didn't just entertain, they shifted culture. They gave voice to men who were silenced, gave dignity to stories history tried to bury, gave truth to generations searching for someone who reflected their strength. Even his family, shaped by the same quiet fortitude he inherited from his parents, carries pieces of his legacy forward. His children stepped into acting and directing not because of his shadow, but because of the light he cast, a light that taught them humility, resilience, and reverence for the craft. Students at theater programs still study his performances frame by frame, searching for the mystery of how he made every gesture feel inevitable. Filmmakers speak of his presence as if recalling an ancient force in the industry. Steady, disciplined, unwavering. He didn't chase immortality. He built it quietly, one decision at a time, knowing that true legacy is not measured in fame, but in the impact a man leaves on the hearts he never meets. And today, when audiences revisit his films, they don't just see an actor, they see a blueprint for endurance, a reminder that greatness is not the absence of struggle, but the ability to rise again and again, even when no one is watching. If his story moves you, leave a small tribute in your own way, because legacies like this are meant to be remembered, protected, and passed forward. In the end, his legacy settles like a quiet breath over the landscape of American cinema. Firm, unshakable, carved not in stone, but in the memory of those who felt seen through his work. The man who once rose from hunger, dust, and silence became the steady voice of truth in an industry that often forgets what truth sounds like. And just as he began, he closed his story with restraint, humility, and the same quiet force that guided him through every triumph and every wound. From silence he rose, and in silence he left behind a legacy that refuses to fade. What remains now is not the fortune, not the trophies, not the headlines that once chased his name. What remains is the blueprint of a life lived with purpose. The image of a man who stood tall not because the world lifted him, but because he learned early on that integrity is the only foundation that never collapses. His films continue to glow like lanterns in the dark, guiding those who search for meaning, those who seek courage, those who need proof that greatness can be gentle. And as the screen fades to black, one truth lingers. Time will carry many names forward, but only a few will carry light. Denzel Washington is one of them. A man whose legacy still breathes, still teaches, still asks us to rise with the same quiet strength he carried all his life.